In the high-stakes arena of American politics, where words are weapons and image is everything, few moments cut through the noise to reveal an unvarnished truth. This is a story of one such moment, a dramatic confrontation that unfolded not on a battlefield, but under the bright lights of a congressional hearing room. It was a clash between two powerful figures, a meticulously laid trap, and a revelation that would send shockwaves across the nation. The scene was set on Capitol Hill. The air in the committee chamber was thick with tension, crackling with partisan energy. Under the blazing lights, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas sat poised at the long mahogany table. Her deep purple suit was a splash of color against the formal backdrop, a symbol of the confidence she carried. Across the room, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi approached the witness stand. Dressed in a crisp, cream-colored blazer, she projected an image of seasoned authority. For 15 minutes, Bondi had held the room's attention. Her voice, steady and assured, delivered a pointed critique of several government policies. Her presentation was polished, her credentials impeccable. On one side of the aisle, committee members nodded along in clear approval. On social media, commentators were already framing her testimony as a significant victory. She appeared untouchable, a master of her narrative. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes for questioning. The chairman's voice echoed, a formal cue that would ignite the fuse. All eyes turned to the Congresswoman. She calmly adjusted her microphone, her expression a mask of focused determination. The previous partisan chatter died away, replaced by a palpable, waiting silence. This was not going to be a routine exchange, Congresswoman Crockett began, her voice measured yet powerful enough to carry to the back of the room. Ms. Bondi, she started, I have just one document I'd like to discuss with you today. She held up a single piece of paper. It seemed innocuous, but in the world of congressional hearings, a single document can be a weapon. What happened in the next 30 seconds would leave the entire committee speechless and change the trajectory of multiple careers. But to understand the magnitude of that half-minute, we must first understand the players and the stage upon which this drama was set. Pam Bondi entered that hearing room with the unmistakable confidence of a Washington insider. As Florida's former Attorney General and a frequent voice on conservative media, she had built a formidable reputation. She was a defender of traditional policies, a polished speaker, and a figure many believed was positioning herself for a run for higher office. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her demeanor unshakable. This testimony was meant to be her platform, her moment to cement her status as a leading voice and a trusted authority on law and accountability. Political analysts had noted her rising star. She was articulate, experienced, and understood the levers of power in the Capitol. For all appearances, this was Pam Bondi's day to shine. On the other side sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. A former civil rights attorney from Texas, she had quickly made a name for herself in Congress with a sharp, legalistic approach to questioning. At 43, she was known for her meticulous preparation and a refusal to engage in mere political grandstanding. Supporters praised her as a representative who came armed with facts, not just talking points. She built her cases like the trial lawyer she once was, methodically and with evidentiary precision. Political analysts had noted her rising star. She was articulate, experienced, and understood the levers of power in the Capitol. For all appearances, this was Pam Bondi's day to shine. On the other side sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. A former civil rights attorney from Texas, she had quickly made a name for herself in Congress with a sharp, legalistic approach to questioning. At 43, she was known for her meticulous preparation and a refusal to engage in mere political grandstanding. Supporters praised her as a representative who came armed with facts, not just talking points. She built her cases like the trial lawyer she once was, methodically and with evidentiary precision. The hearing itself, officially about government accountability, was a microcosm of the nation's political divisions. Both sides had their agendas. But what no one anticipated was the bombshell Congresswoman Crockett and her staff had been quietly assembling for weeks. They had been investigating inconsistencies, following paper trails, and uncovering a story that stood in stark contrast to the image of ethical purity being presented. As Bondi settled into her seat that morning, she exchanged confident smiles with allies on the committee. When her eyes briefly met Crockett's, she likely saw just another political opponent to be managed with prepared remarks. She was completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. The hearing began as these events often do. Friendly questioners gave Bondi the opportunity to expand on her critiques, painting a picture of an administration that, in her view, had abandoned transparency. She spoke of her record in Florida, of saving taxpayer money, and of the essential nature of oversight. For nearly an hour, the partisan dance continued. Then, a crack appeared. A moderate Republican broke ranks, asking a pointed question about certain decisions during Bondi's tenure as Attorney General, specifically concerning campaign contributions and her office's choice not to join certain lawsuits. A flicker of tension crossed Bondi's face before her training took over. "I appreciate the question, Congressman," she replied smoothly. "Every decision I made was based solely on the law and the best interests of my constituents. Any suggestion otherwise is simply political mudslinging." The chairman quickly intervened to steer the hearing back to safer ground, but the seed had been planted. From her seat, Congresswoman Crockett watched this exchange intently, her pen making a firm note on the legal pad before her. As the hours passed, the temperature in the room rose. The questioning grew more heated, the objections more frequent. The atmosphere became chaotic, a familiar scene of congressional discord. Through it all, Crockett remained an island of calm, patiently waiting for her 5 minutes, occasionally conferring with her staff and reviewing the documents that lay before her. Then came the moment. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes. A subtle shift occurred. Staffers looked up from their phones. Whispering members fell silent. The C-SPAN cameras zoomed in. Something in Crockett's demeanor signaled that this would be different. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began. "Ms. Bondi, you've spoken at length today about accountability and transparency in government. You've positioned yourself as an authority on ethical leadership." Bondi nodded, her expression confident. "Those have been guiding principles throughout my career." "I appreciate that perspective," Crockett replied, her tone neutral. She then established the basic facts of Bondi's tenure as Florida's Attorney General. The questions were soft, almost lulling. Then, she reached for a document. "I'd like to enter into the record an article from the Orlando Sentinel, dated September 2013. As copies were distributed, she continued. "Ms. Bondi, this article discusses a $25,000 campaign contribution you received from the Trump Foundation in 2013. The contribution arrived just days after your office announced it was considering joining a lawsuit against Trump University. Ultimately, Florida decided not to participate in that lawsuit. Do you recall this situation?" The room grew colder. Bondi's posture stiffened. "That matter was thoroughly reviewed years ago," she said, her voice noticeably tighter. "There was no connection. The decision was made on legal merit alone." Crockett nodded, her expression still unreadable. "I understand that's your position." Then, she reached for a second document. The atmosphere crackled. "Now, I'd like to discuss something more recent. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record this document, dated March of this year." As the papers were handed out, a wave of murmurs spread. Republican staffers began frantically whispering. On the national broadcast feed, a camera caught the first genuine flicker of concern on Pam Bondi's face. "Ms. Bondi," Crockett said, her voice still calm but now cutting through the room like a laser. "Are you familiar with this document?" Bondi glanced down, then back up, her composure beginning to fracture. "I would need time to review this thoroughly." "Of course," Crockett replied. "Let me help refresh your memory. The document before you is an email exchange between you and several executives at a company called Precision Pharmaceuticals, dated March 15 of this year." She paused, letting the name of the company hang in the air. In these emails, you discuss potential consulting arrangements while simultaneously referencing your influence over pending legislation that would directly affect their industry. Are you familiar with this correspondence? The room fell into a stunned silence. Bondi stammered, "I have many email exchanges in my work. I'd need the full context." "The full context is provided in the 12 pages entered into the record," Crockett stated firmly. "Let me direct your attention to page 4, where you wrote, and I quote, 'My relationships with key committee members should prove valuable as this legislation moves forward. Once we formalize our arrangement, I can be more specific about intervention strategies.'" Cameras zeroed in on Bondi's hands, which trembled slightly as she flipped to the page. The microphone picked up her sharp, anxious intake of breath. "These appear to be private communications that have been," Bondi began, flustered. "These are communications relevant to government oversight," Crockett interrupted, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Communications that directly contradict your testimony today about ethical leadership and transparency. Would you agree that discussing intervention strategies with a pharmaceutical company, while leveraging your political connections, raises serious ethical concerns?" Bondi looked desperately toward the committee chairman. "Mr. Chairman, I object. This is an ambush. These are selective quotations." The chairman, looking deeply uncomfortable, could only reply, "The gentlewoman has the floor and may proceed." Crockett didn't wait. "Ms. Bondi, on page 7 of this same email thread, you specifically mention having advanced knowledge of regulatory decisions that would affect Precision's stock value. You then suggest, and I quote, 'There are ways to structure our relationship that would allow for mutual benefit based on this information.' Could you explain what you meant by that?" The chamber erupted. Objections were shouted, calls for order rang out. Journalists typed furiously. The hearing was spiraling into chaos, and at the center of it all sat Pam Bondi, her confident facade crumbling in real time before a watching nation. The masterclass in testimony had become a masterclass in exposure, and part 1 of this dramatic confrontation was reaching its devastating climax. "Once we formalize our arrangement, I can be more specific about intervention strategies." Cameras zeroed in on Bondi's hands, which trembled slightly as she flipped to the page. The microphone picked up her sharp, anxious intake of breath. "These appear to be private communications that have been," Bondi began, flustered. "These are communications relevant to government oversight," Crockett interrupted, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Communications that directly contradict your testimony today about ethical leadership and transparency. Would you agree that discussing intervention strategies with a pharmaceutical company, while leveraging your political connections, raises serious ethical concerns?" Bondi looked desperately toward the committee chairman. "Mr. Chairman, I object. This is an ambush. These are selective quotations." The chairman, looking deeply uncomfortable, could only reply, "The gentlewoman has the floor and may proceed." Crockett didn't wait. "Ms. Bondi, on page 7 of this same email thread, you specifically mention having advanced knowledge of regulatory decisions that would affect Precision's stock value. You then suggest, and I quote, 'There are ways to structure our relationship that would allow for mutual benefit based on this information.' Could you explain what you meant by that?" The chamber erupted. Objections were shouted, calls for order rang out. Journalists typed furiously. The hearing was spiraling into chaos, and at the center of it all sat Pam Bondi, her confident facade crumbling in real time before a watching nation. The masterclass in testimony had become a masterclass in exposure, and part 1 of this dramatic confrontation was reaching its devastating climax. As the hearing room descended into chaos, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett remained an island of calm amidst the storm. She had one more document, and the timing of its revelation would be just as precise and devastating as the last. While Republican members shouted objections and the chairman struggled to maintain order, Crockett waited patiently for the noise to subside, her gaze fixed on a visibly shaken Pam Bondi. When a semblance of quiet returned, Crockett held up a third set of papers. The room collectively leaned forward, every person aware that they were witnessing political history unfold in real time. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said, her voice cutting cleanly through the tension, I would like to enter into the record this financial disclosure form from Precision Pharmaceuticals, filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission last month. As staffers hurried to distribute copies, Crockett continued, her eyes never leaving Bondi. Ms. Bondi, this disclosure reveals a payment of $750,000 from Precision Pharmaceuticals to a limited liability company called Strategic Advocacy Partners LLC. According to Florida business records, you are the sole managing member of this LLC. She paused, letting the staggering figure hang in the air. Camera flashes illuminated Bondi's face, which had gone ashen. This payment, Crockett emphasized, was processed just 2 weeks after the legislation we've been discussing, the legislation you referenced in your emails, was successfully blocked in committee. Are you disputing the accuracy of these records? Bondi's voice was a strained, defensive whisper, barely picked up by the microphone. Congresswoman, you're presenting complex business arrangements without proper context. There are legitimate consulting relationships that. Crockett did not let her finish. Her voice, for the first time, sharpened with intensity. Yes or no, Ms. Bondi? Did you or did you not receive $750,000 from Precision Pharmaceuticals through your LLC, while simultaneously using your political connections to influence legislation that would have regulated their industry? Bondi faltered, her words tangling. These are complicated, the structures don't. They don't seem complicated to me, Crockett stated, her words delivering the final, decisive blow. They seem like a clear-cut case of the very ethics violations and potential corruption you've spent this entire hearing criticizing in others. She let the silence that followed press down on the room before delivering her coup de grace. And what's more, Ms. Bondi, she continued, reaching for her final piece of evidence, we have obtained text messages between you and Congressman Barrett, the chairman of the committee that blocked this legislation, discussing what you referred to as appreciation gestures from Precision if he could, and I quote, make the problem go away. Would you like me to enter those text messages into the record as well? The chamber exploded. This time, the reaction was not just partisan shouting, but genuine gasps of shock from both sides of the aisle. The implication was undeniable, a potential quid pro quo scheme, laid bare in a congressional hearing for all to see. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly, his calls for order lost in the din. Amid the chaos, a Republican congressman shouted a request for a recess. But the damage was irrevocable. As Bondi sat frozen, her career unraveling in front of the C-SPAN cameras, Crockett had one final, devastating question. Ms. Bondi, she began, the room quieting enough to hear her. You began your testimony today by stating, accountability means holding everyone to the same standard, regardless of position or party. Given the evidence presented here today, the emails, the financial payment, the text messages, do you believe you have held yourself to that standard? For a long, painful moment, Pam Bondi said nothing. The camera captured every micro-expression of shock, dread, and realization that she had no defense. The polished persona had vanished, replaced by a portrait of utter defeat. When she finally spoke, her voice was a hollow, broken thing. I would like to assert my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer at this time. 14 words that echoed like a thunderclap. The former Attorney General, the self-proclaimed champion of accountability, had just invoked her constitutional right against self-incrimination. It was an admission of guilt in the court of public opinion, Crockett simply nodded. The point had been made more powerfully than any further questioning ever could. I yield back the remainder of my time, Mr. Chairman. As she gathered her documents, the shocked silence in the room was louder than any applause. In just under 5 minutes, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had not only dismantled a narrative, she had dismantled a career. The hearing was hastily adjourned for a recess that would become permanent. Bondi was swiftly surrounded by lawyers and whisked away from the press scrum that had gathered, a photograph of her shell-shocked expression destined for front pages nationwide. Meanwhile, Crockett exited to a hallway buzzing with quiet admiration from staffers and colleagues, her dignified composure a stark contrast to the collapse she had just engineered. The aftermath was swift and severe. Within minutes, the confrontation went viral. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett vs. Bondi and hashtag accountability moment trended nationally. News networks broke into their programming, with cheerins reading, Bombshell, Bondi implicated in alleged pay-to-play scheme, and Congressional hearing erupts in stunning corruption allegations. The political ramifications were immediate. A prominent senator who had considered Bondi for a campaign role issued a statement re-evaluating all relationships. Conservative advocacy groups scrubbed her name from their websites. The board of Precision Pharmaceuticals called an emergency meeting as their stock price began a precipitous plunge. On cable news, analysts dissected the political chess match they had witnessed. What we saw was a masterclass in preparation and execution, stated a former federal prosecutor on a primetime panel. Congresswoman Crockett didn't just make accusations, she presented a sequenced, documented case that left no room for escape. The financial disclosure was the knife, and the text messages were the twist. Social media amplified the fallout exponentially. Memes juxtaposing Bondi's confident opening statement with her panicked Fifth Amendment plea spread like wildfire. One clip, set to a dramatic soundtrack, showing the exact moment Crockett revealed the $750,000 payment, garnered over 20 million views in a single day. In the following week, the story only grew. The House Ethics Committee announced formal investigations into both Bondi's consulting arrangements and Congressman Barrett's conduct. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened an inquiry into Precision Pharmaceuticals for potential violations. The Justice Department, while not commenting publicly, was widely reported to be examining the evidence for potential criminal charges. Pam Bondi's career in public life was effectively over. Her spokesperson's weak statement claiming misleading characterizations did little to slow the tide. Invitations to speak were withdrawn, and political allies distanced themselves at a remarkable speed. The speed of the collapse is telling, observed a political historian. When you have a paper trail this explicit, emails, financial records, texts, and the only response is to plead the fifth, there is no political recovery. The credibility is gone forever. For Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, the event was a transformative moment. Donations to her campaign flooded in. She was praised from editorial boards to late-night talk shows as a new model of effective oversight. She became a national figure, a symbol of holding power to account, with pundits already speculating about her future potential. But beyond the personal triumphs and falls, the confrontation created a Crockett effect in Washington, a newfound sense of caution among public figures. Several members of Congress were reported to have quietly dissolved questionable consulting arrangements. There was a renewed legislative push for stricter disclosure laws and ethical safeguards, a direct response to the loopholes the hearing had exposed. The lasting image of the entire affair was not of a loud, dramatic shouting match, but of a calm, methodical dismantling. It was a powerful reminder that in an age of spin and narrative, irrefutable evidence, presented with precision and courage, remains the most potent force in politics. It proved that accountability is not just a word to be used in speeches, but an action to be demanded with proof. And in that charged hearing room, for those unforgettable 5 minutes, accountability was served. What you've just witnessed is a powerful reminder of why transparency in government matters. This is the kind of in-depth, evidence-based reporting we are committed to bringing you. If you believe in holding power accountable, then your voice and your attention are crucial. This story affects everyone who cares about ethical leadership. Comment below with your thoughts. Who do you think needs to be held accountable next? What issues matter most to you? The political landscape changes fast. We break down the complex stories so you understand the real stakes. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a report that impacts your community and your country. If this report was valuable, share it. Spread the knowledge. Help others understand how their government really works. Knowledge is the foundation of a healthy democracy. This is more than just politics, it's about the future of our nation. Subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together.